I'm your host, Jason Tartick, and welcome to Trading Secrets. We talk all things money on this podcast, and we're teaching all the stuff we just weren't taught in the classroom. Nothing supports this show more than liking, commenting, and of course, subscribing. Welcome back to another episode of Trading Secrets. Today we are joined by one of the most recognizable and respected journalists in America, Kaitlan Collins. Kaitlan is the anchor of The Source on CNN and CNN's chief White House correspondent, where she brings clarity and accountability to the stories shaping our world. As a chief White House correspondent, she has covered both Trump and Biden, and now Trump again, and is making history as the youngest ever to hold that role at the network. She has reported from the halls of the White House to international summits, pressing world leaders and presidents alike with sharp, fearless questions. Kaitlan's rise from local Alabama roots is a story of ambition, resilience, and navigating the business of media at the highest level. Today, we will explore the financial realities of journalism, the business of a major news network, behind the scenes of the biggest moments, and how Kaitlan has built a personal brand and one of the most competitive industries in the world. Kaitlan, we've been trying for months to get you on Trading Secrets. You are finally here, and it is so nice to meet you.
It is great to be here. I'm a big viewer. I love the podcast. It's
love
great.
that.
And yeah, I know our schedule is crazy, but it's nice to be here. So hopefully no like major crises break out.
I mean, there's a million things for me to get into. Now I'm going off the cuff. You got two phones there. What's the situation? How's that work?
Yeah, I've had two phones for like 10 years now. So it's totally normal to me. Like, I just think everyone has two phones.
So one's work, one's personal?
Technically, one is work and one is personal, but they're so intermixed at this point that it's like, people will call me from either, or they're like, it's actually really effective as a reporter to have two numbers. Okay. Because if someone thinks you're calling them on one number and they're dodging you, you can just call them on the other. And always from my Alabama number, they pick up like immediately. Yeah. Because they're like, who's calling me from Alabama?
For sure.
Surprise, it's me.
Gotcha. You're playing the game of cards. You got tea, you got coffee, two phones. We were talking about it before this, so I want to get into it now. What is like your day-to-day schedule look like? When does it start? When does it end? Where do you actually have a home? Do you have a home? Do you just live on a plane? What is the day-to-day look like?
I live out of a suitcase, basically.
Yeah, right?
Honestly, every day depends on like the president. Okay. I don't really have a set schedule every single day. Like I'll cancel a million lunches or things. I'm like the worst friend to have because I'm always canceling, but always rescheduling. Every night, the White House schedule comes out like 10 p.m. And that's usually when I'm getting off air from the show. So you'll kind of have an idea, like, is he getting an intelligence briefing the next day? Is he meeting with a world leader? Is there a press briefing? And that really dictates my schedule mostly during the week. Because if he's doing stuff, you know, it's important. You've got to be up and be ready at the White House. And so, you know, it kind of just depends on really what he's doing. Okay,
I'm so interested in the White House logistics. We'll get into kind of the differences behind the scenes of what you can share regarding that. But just off the cuff, you said you get that briefing or schedule roughly around 10 p.m.
Yep.
How does that compare into the schedule that you got during the Biden administration?
Maybe they were a little earlier, but pretty similar, especially in terms of, is there a press briefing tomorrow? Like, what's the president doing? It's different because Trump is such an accessible president that, like, if he's just swearing in the ambassador to Greece, like, typically that wouldn't be a newsworthy event if President Biden or any typical president was probably doing it. But Trump's moments, anytime the camera's around and the reporters are around, it can turn into a press conference. And so you never go into the Oval thinking, oh, this is going to be a quick, we call them sprays. It's where you go in, basically a photo op, and then you leave. Because Trump will swear someone in and then he'll turn to you and say, you know, any questions? And he'll take maybe questions for 45 minutes. And so you have to, like, I always keep a running list of questions on my phone. Okay. Because you never know when you're going to run into him or when he's going to start taking questions. And so you can't just have one or two. Like, you have to have like 10 ready to go.
Because you said the word typical president, right? Not your typical president. Typical president was swearing in someone from Greece, like we would know. Is that because of predictability?
So Trump is my first president that I ever covered. And I covered Biden as well. And so I can compare it to him. But even with President Obama, you know, there are these moments in the Oval Office that everyone has come to know because you see them on TV so often. Right. But when you speak to reporters who covered President Obama, he almost never responded to shouted questions. It wasn't his thing. He didn't, you know, he would have his moments with world leaders and then you would leave the Oval. Trump kind of upended that when he came into the White House. And sometimes presidents are press averse. Trump embraced the media. I mean, he did it for decades as like this New York mogul. Sure. And so he just had a different approach to the press and always has. long before taking office. Most politicians are not very press savvy. It kind of depends on who it is. I think Trump always understood the value of a camera and a microphone.
That kind of things, like when you say that, I go immediately to reality TV days. Very tough to compare the two. But he was a reality star.
Not really, actually.
Right? Actually, right. So you will see when the crew's coming in, you'll know the cameras, you'll know the angles, and you'll also get to see what players in the game are working them the best. The people that like know when to be on, say the right things, get their little bites in really efficiently. From a political standpoint, going into politicians, do you see differences in how they're working behind the scenes from a production standpoint and who does it best?
Yeah, well, this is actually how I started covering Trump. I wasn't really a political reporter before Trump. I mean, I'd covered that race, but it was when Trump became president that no one was expecting his win, even the Trump people. I was at Trump Tower the day of the election, and we were speaking to some of the campaign staff, and their kind of reaction back in 2016 was, wild ride, can't believe it's over.
Yeah.
They definitely thought that they were packing up and going home. So that night, shocked a lot of America and the world. It also shocked the Trump campaign team, who did not think they were on this glide path to victory, just given so much had happened.
Right.
And my boss at the time was like, well, I had covered like celebrities and pop culture, and they were like, well, celebrity's now the president, so just go cover it. And I had no idea what I was doing when I walked into the White House on day one. And I truly just figured it out as I went along. And so, covering Trump, you even saw in his first term, certainly, and it's very obvious now, how he thinks about the production value. When he hosts a cabinet meeting before, I'll never forget, it's this huge room and it's got all these windows alongside one wall. And the curtains are typically open because it's not thought to be, how can we shoot this? What's the lighting?
Yeah.
Trump had them put up these black boards over the windows. So when the reporters came in, the lighting would look nice in the room.
Wow.
That's how his brain is thinking. And anytime he hosts an event, there's always lights and everything. He has very much a TV mind still.
And do you find that that's similar or very different than other politicians that you've interviewed and been able to work
Very
with?
different.
Okay.
Very, very different. I don't know any other politician with the exception of President Zelensky.
Yeah.
And obviously he's at war, so it's not really top of mind for him. That is like a TV, kind of celeb figure that in recent memory. Obviously there's Ronald Reagan and others who had their moments. But Trump is very reality TV brained as well.
Right, exactly. It's so fascinating. Now switch that perspective to the journalists, the correspondents. When you're in the room with them, do you see any one of your peers that does that exceptionally well, works the cameras well, pre-production, thinking about what they're doing, that maybe either you look up to or you've emulated?
Yeah, a lot of reporters. The press corps at the White House is actually incredibly collegial, and I have so many friends there. I love being back covering the White House because you have a real camaraderie if you're a press corps on Capitol Hill or covering a candidate on the road, you just form this bond because a lot of covering politics is not glamorous all the time. Like the White House, even, it's not champagne and caviar. It's a lot of waiting around. You're out in the heat, you're in the cold, you're just kind of waiting for something to happen. And then it happens really quickly.
Sure.
And so you just have to always be prepared. And you just form bonds doing that and covering so many things. And so I have a lot of respect for my colleagues in the press corps. I learn a lot from them. I learned a lot and still do. And it's different. There's some reporters who are TV reporters who obviously they know where the cameras are. They understand making sure your microphone is right or that you're capturing the audio of something. A print reporter may not think of that. They just want the quote that they can put in their story in the Post or the New York Times. So you think of the medium that you're, working for. If you're radio, things like that. So yeah, I think they're mindful of it, but I think that's more for the coverage perspective because they want to make sure if there's a really great quote, you want it on camera.
Yeah.
We were just at the Pentagon on 9/11, and I was in the press corps, which means it's like a small amount of people that are traveling with him, the press pool. Trump was not supposed to speak to the media, wasn't scheduled to do so, and then at the end, we were standing right by the door, and the Beast, which is the presidential car, is right there. And out walks the president with Melania. And he sees us standing there. And the Charlie Kirk assassination had just happened. And there was no camera with me. I didn't have a mic on, anything. But I just started recording on my phone because he was coming to speak to us. And I didn't want to only have the quote. You want to be able to have the video to show on to show on the air.
You're wearing every single one of those hats. That's a perfect example, too, of having those questions prepared before you have to go.
Exactly.
You just have to expect the unexpected. I want to go back to the two phones and then getting a hold of Trump and then using the different numbers. I saw the Stephen Colbert interview you did, right? The story, if you haven't seen it, we'll show it on social media. It's unbelievable. But you find out via text, President Biden puts out a text that he will not be running for re-election.
Yep.
That's how you find out. You're on your way to, I think, the studio. You get the news. You got to go back to get a blazer. And in this interview, which took me by surprise, you said in the backseat you called Trump at this point. So you called him directly. He picked up. Give us a little behind the scenes. How does that work when you are trying to patch into, one of the most important leaders in the country, or potentially soon to be, or someone with such influence that the world is trying to reach out to? How are you connecting with them? Do you have a direct line? Do you have to patch through? What does that look like?
No, I just called his cell phone. I mean, to my point about,
does he have your number saved?
I don't know if he has it saved, because he always comments on my area code when I call, because it's an Alabama area code.
Okay.
He knows I have his number, though. And so, obviously covering him, Trump often speaks best when he speaks for himself. I think his spokespeople have learned that, just to let him do the talking.
Yeah.
And when he was out of office, in that period from his first term and his second term, and indictments were happening, all these investigations around him. He had a big legal team, but his staff was kind of always changing. Anyway, so I would just call him directly. I didn't make a habit out of it, but if there's something huge happening, like the day of the Mar-a-Lago raid, when the FBI showed up and executed a search warrant over the classified documents, we had heard it was happening. Our people on the ground in Florida were trying to get in touch with law enforcement sources. And it was kind of one of those moments where I was like, we will be best served if I just call him directly and ask if this is true. And it was true. And he sent me the statement immediately confirming it. And then it just kind of was off to the races from there. And then obviously another seminal moment was when President Biden dropped out, because that was his opponent. And so the big question was, who is he going to be facing? I mean, it was a really crazy moment for the Trump campaign when Biden dropped out, because they did not know. They had made this game plan to run against this one guy. It's like if you're playing in the Super Bowl. Sure. Obviously with a lot longer lead up, you're planning for this one team, and then say the other team gets swapped out at the last moment, or, the quarterback changes. And so it's just, it totally upended it. And so I called him, but in a breaking news moment, and I was thinking so quickly and trying to get to the studio quickly, I had just put him on speakerphone, and I was in an Uber, and this poor Uber driver, cause his voice is so distinct.
Of course.
I mean, I think if you called any president, it would be the same effect. And he was just kind of looking back at me, no way. He was processing it in real time. But I was just trying to write down the quote. That's the benefit of having two phones. Calls on one, you can write down and email the quote on the other. Because it was Trump's first reaction to Biden dropping out of the race. What was,
obviously we got to see your quote and his thoughts, but from your vantage point with his energy and tone when he picked up, was he surprised?
Yeah, and I think he was kind of angry. I don't think he was totally surprised, because it was kind of, you could see it coming. I mean, Biden took a while to drop out after CNN hosted that debate where it was this disastrous performance. It was a few weeks before Biden was actually convinced to drop out of the race. And we were at the Republican convention, and then Biden got COVID, and he was at home, and he had been sick. And so we'd been watching this moment, because I don't know, when you're home sick, you're kind of evaluating all of your life choices and what you're doing. It's so rare in this world where you have a moment where you're just doing nothing and you're stuck kind of. And, that was kind of the position the president was in. He was isolated. He was at his Delaware home. And that was when he called up some of his closest aides, and he decided to exit the race. And so I do think Trump was surprised, but not totally caught off guard. And I think he was a bit angry about it, because obviously that was when they all just kind of formed around Kamala Harris. There was no primary. I mean, there was no precedent really for this. It had happened only once before, and nothing like this. And so, yeah, it was just a crazy moment in a year of them.
And now we're seeing, obviously, she depicts a lot of that in her book that's out, and it was unprecedented, and I can't imagine it was covering it. But let's do this. We've seen all your success. You've done it at such a young age. Let's go back to the derivative of it. So 2017, you go to CNN. Before CNN, you're at the Daily Caller. Mm-hmm. When you left the Daily Caller to go to CNN, two totally different networks with two, what most media research biases would say, different biases. What sparked that decision? And did you consider other networks before CNN?
Yeah. So that was when I started covering the White House, the Daily Caller. I didn't even know how to go to the press briefings, and we didn't have a seat in the briefings. I would have to go hours before Sean Spicer would come out and just basically perch myself there.
Throwback.
And I would just sit there and work on my questions. Yeah, it was when they were like must-see television. Yeah. And because of those briefings, I was invited to go on CNN.
Right.
And I had kind of thought that maybe I wouldn't be treated fairly because I worked at a conservative outlet. I didn't know what to expect. And I also had no experience in television. And I went on CNN and they were completely fair to me. And they just asked, what's your reporting? Like, what's happening inside the White House? And they treated me just very straightforwardly. And I really appreciated it. And so a few months went by, I think, and I had the opportunity. I met the president of the network at the time, Jeff Zucker, and I introduced myself to him. I said, hey, I just wanted to say thanks for letting me come on. Like, you guys treated me so fairly and with such professionalism. And I really appreciated that because I'd kind of, I just had these preconceived notions. And I was not angling for a job. I had never worked in television. I didn't want to work in television. And a few weeks after that, I got hired at CNN. And it was kind of a moment where I'd interviewed at a few other places, but CNN felt right. And they were putting me on the White House team, and they wanted my experience having worked at a conservative leaning outlet and also being from the South. I think I really understood Trump voters because I'm related to a lot of them. And so whenever people say that CNN's biased or whatever the criticism is sometimes, I'm like, well, they hired me from the Daily Caller and they hired me to be a reporter, not to be any kind of political analyst or opinionated person, just a White House reporter. And it was the opportunity of a lifetime, and it's been an amazing 8 years.
That's fascinating. In all different industries, there's different networks or companies, and there's different perceptions that people in the industry where they'll know, like the trading secrets, some pay better, some have better benefits, the list goes on. Is there any of that in your industry? Is it known that certain networks will pay better or have better benefits or that will provide better trajectory or anything like that? Or is it a free-for-all?
I think it kind of depends on the person themselves because you're not guaranteed success anywhere you go. Yeah. Only if you work hard, I think, and you build good relationships and you try. I think that is the only chance you have at being successful, no matter what job you're in. And I've always applied myself. If I was, I was a cart girl in college at a golf course in my hometown. Like, I've had some crazy, random jobs before this, but I always tried really hard at them because that's just my mindset. But what I'll say about CNN that is amazing, and if you read CNN's history, it's fascinating because we weren't taken seriously when CNN was first started by Ted Turner. Everyone thought he was crazy, 24-hour news. And then we started covering things and putting resources, and the Gulf War happened, and, CNN's reputation changed, and it became the go-to place that people went to during breaking news. And I think it provides a really vital resource. But what I'll say I was blown away by at CNN when I was 25 years old and starting, the resources. Just walking around the newsroom, I mean, anyone you talk to is someone who has covered foreign policy for decades, or they know the Justice Department better than anyone. And so I built a wealth of knowledge just, talking to my colleagues who had covered so many things and have the best stories. Wolf Blitzer was one of the first anchors to take me out to dinner. And he told me these amazing stories about covering the Clinton White House and what it was like. And now he's one of my best friends at CNN. Wow. And it's things like that I think it's the wealth of the relationships that has been the best for me, which is why I love it and have been there for so long. It
makes perfect sense. The resources can drive so much of that decision making. We obviously talk money on this podcast a lot, so I got to at least ask, see what you can give me. 2017 to 2025, your value has increased significantly. Your roles have changed a lot. How do you negotiate year to year? How do you understand what your value is in such a kind of obscure industry where there's only one of one? And what do contracts look like? Are they on an annual basis, biannual basis? Give us what you can.
Yeah. For TV, generally contracts are 3 to 4 years for most people. It kind of depends on what job you're doing. Obviously, television is not just the people who are on camera. We have producers and photojournalists and tech ops and people who are, the floor crews. I mean, there is so much that goes into it, and what happens on camera would not happen without the people behind the camera. And they're just as good as reporters as the rest of us. So I think it depends on what you're doing. But if you're on TV and you're a correspondent, it's generally a 3 to 4 year contract. And so, sometimes you get to the end of the contract and then renegotiate it. Sometimes with mine, I've gotten different jobs while I'm in the middle of a contract, still at CNN, but just different roles, whether that's moving from being a correspondent to an anchor or whatnot, or now, I went from being correspondent to anchor to now I'm anchor and correspondent. Okay. So it's like double jobs. Yeah. And it's just it depends on it's so like individualized. But generally, that's what it is. But as far as negotiating, I learned how to negotiate at my first job at the Daily Caller. Yeah. And we had this business manager, like this office manager, and I'll never forget, I was making like $0. And I told her I was going to go ask our boss for a raise, and she knew him really well. And she gave me...
Is this while you're at CNN, you said?
No, Daily Caller. Daily Caller. Okay. I was like 22, maybe 23.
How much were you making?
When I first started, I made $25,000 a year and got commission based on like clicks.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah, but it was so stressful because if you took like 3 days off and you didn't write any stories,
you're in trouble.
You didn't get paid. But honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything because I think living like that is really good. Mm-hmm. Like just when you're in the real world. This is why I always tell people who are graduating college, I'm like, just take any job. Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be your dream job. It's not going to be your dream job. Just do it. But this office manager gave me a ton of advice on how to advocate for myself and how to ask for a raise. And I'd never done that before. And I think people should be taught that because you don't know how to negotiate, when you get into the real world.
Do you have like a manager that helps you do this, or do you do it yourself? Because it's weird that you're like, you are TV entertainment talent, but also your own journalist. Like, how does that work?
Typically, TV reporters have agents who help do that stuff.
Have agents,
and just kind of know the business and understand like how that works. But it really depends for everybody.
You're going to give me a trading secret because you're the best in the country at asking questions, right? Okay. And all day you're dealing with politicians that you get good answers, but you might not get the answer. I just got great information from you. You just gave me everything I need, but I also didn't get anything as it relates to how much you might be making or have made or any dollar amount. What would your follow-up question to you be if you were me?
Well, okay, it depends. If you're a public official, it's different. I'm way harder on people who make money, who get paid by taxpayers.
Sure, that's
I think that there's no limits.
Yeah, it's also you can find most of that information out.
Yeah, I think I would follow up honestly, but I think like people knowing how much money I make wouldn't really be that helpful. Yeah. I think my fault would be, if you're a young person, you're trying to negotiate, like what's my number one piece of advice? Because I think when I talk to young people, that is like they need help with things like that. You know,
that's true.
Because every job is different, but
what would be your
they're actually not that
advice
different.
Then? I'm going to take your question.
I think my advice would be, actually I just did this with someone recently, is to go in if you're trying to make more money, is to say, look, I love this job. I really want to be invested in your company and I want to stay here. I don't have to look for new jobs, but I need to be better compensated if I'm going to stay here and continue to work in this role. And I'd like to have a conversation about that.
I love that.
It's a better way to say, I want a raise, because they know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But you're also saying, look at all of the value I bring to your company. Don't you want me to stay?
If you and I were sitting over a beer in Alabama getting ready for a football game, here's what I would...
A
yellow hammer. Oh, those are...
You went to Gillette's.
Awful, by the way.
No, they're
those
so
yellow
good.
hammers, it tasted good, but after one, I'm like, that is more sugar than I could... Like, I'm going to have the worst hangover.
Yeah, but when you're in college, you don't care about that.
That's true. It's a great college drink.
Yeah.
But like, once you're in your 30s, I was like, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah, it hits different.
But here's what I would say. I would say, take your skill set. You've been putting it out there since day one. You're bipartisan, and go to a competitive network, get an offer, and say, "I want to stay here, but can you get competitive?"
That's true, but you know what you have to be willing to do in that
is leave.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and that's tough.
That's tough. All right, I'm curious about this. How do ratings and advertisers' interests factor into your work and your performance? It's really interesting now that the fourth wall is being broken down so much that politicians are very openly talking about people's ratings. We hear President 100%. Trump talking about Jimmy Kimmel's ratings. Like, that is a wild world that we're living in now. We hear Fox News being compared to CNN with ratings and such. Do ratings impact your performance, and how do ratings and advertiser interests then get involved with your job?
Yeah, I mean, Trump will bring up our ratings. Like, if I ask him a question he doesn't like, he'll just not answer. Speaking of deflecting, he'll just not answer and like bring up that or a story that we did that he didn't like. Ratings are important. Obviously, they matter. It's the business model. But, I have 2 jobs and I focus on those and I let other people focus on the ratings. Yeah. And when we decide what we're putting in the show, my team and I every night, which we do, we're constantly rotating and changing things and throwing the script out and trying something new. We do it based on what's the newsiest and like what's interesting and what's a good story. I mean, last night I interviewed the president of the Soybean Farm Association.
Yeah.
Most people would be like, what? Like that's on cable news in prime time. But it's a really important issue and it's affecting a lot of people.
Sure.
And it's kind of at the crux of Trump's election and his appeal to farmers. And so we thought it was important to take a moment at 9:40 or so last night during the show and do that.
I think that's awesome. And you talk about real-time reporting. There's obviously a lot of speculation out there. Of course, President Trump is always like throwing different comments out, but what is something viewers might be surprised to learn about CNN that you guys do in real time to fact check things like an impromptu interview or anything that's happening in current news? Because we hear it, like fake news, fake media is like the constant thing that's said. So like what's a trading secret that maybe either you do or CNN does to like vet things in real time for fast situations that come up?
I always think if you go to someone's job and you watch them do their job, you'll have more respect for what they do. I think that applies to anyone. Like if you're building a house or if you're like a TV reporter. And obviously it is important to be able to fact check in the moment. I think one thing that I've heard from people, whether it was when I was at the White House or now, is they think producers are just talking in your ear constantly. Like there's like some magical producer who knows everything and is just like telling you all the secrets. And in reality, you're just kind of out there doing it. Like when you're in the briefing room, there's no voice in your ear. It's you, and you're relying on your knowledge, which is why you have to be really well read to be a reporter, to be a good reporter. And so I'm constantly researching and like doing homework and focusing on stuff like that because you want to be able to respond in real time. Mm-hmm. And so I just think there's like always this notion that you're reading from a prompter or like someone's talking in your ear. And that's just typically not the case when you're like in a briefing or a press conference or an interview.
Yeah, I think one of the things that separates good from great is the ability to instantly respond based on the information you currently have.
You got to know your shit.
Even if someone was feeding you, right? Like I think recently you just checked Mike Johnson instantly on a fact. That wasn't being said through your earpiece. That was from research and work, correct?
Work that my team and I did that day of the interview because politicians, it's hard to interview them, obviously. You got to like know how to do it, but of course they repeat themselves a lot. And so if you actually just do your research and listen to a few appearances they've done, they will just repeat themselves. And often it's with someone who maybe hasn't, exhaustively, because it takes a lot of work to like fact check something and look it up. And he kept saying this thing. And so we just looked into it, whether or not it was true, couldn't find any evidence that it was. And so we went into that interview thinking, if this is the only thing we do with him, we'll all be good with that because it was, it's worth it.
Yeah, makes sense. Sometimes that gets you into trouble though, or at least we've seen 2018, right? I think the White House barred you from an event based on your questions, which were just questions. When things like that happen, how does that impact your career? And I think that can relate to anyone that's listening to this, that they're doing their job and they're doing it right. And the world says they're doing it right. And then something happens and it sets them back. How do you use a setback like that as a momentum to actually put yourself in a better position from a career perspective?
I think setbacks in life always happen, no matter what line of work you're in.
Yeah.
But it really is how you respond to it and taking it on the chin and like dealing with it and moving on. I think for a reporter, it's really important to be neutral in terms of not letting your emotion get in the way or your personal feelings.
You're so good at that.
Well, I have like no emotions, so that helps.
It's unbelievable. I think I've like literally messaged you before. I'm like, how are you keeping a straight face right now? It's unbelievable.
I won't say who it was, but someone told me recently, they were like, you have resting calm face. And I was like, oh, not like resting bitch face. And they're like, yeah, it's just, you're just calm. And because I think it's like you're interviewing the person for a reason and people want to hear what they have to say. Like they're the power players. They want to know what they're saying. We're there to ask the questions and push back or like, test something. But I think people want to, and if you get in an argument with a politician and it becomes personal, which Trump tries to do a lot, but I've covered him for a long time now. And if you let it get personal and we start arguing about my ratings or credibility,
sure,
he's not answering the question that I asked him,
Yeah.
And
so technically net he's winning that conversation. Right. Okay, this is a good question because I think any profession has to deal with this in some capacity. But like, when you're trying to keep your composure in a situation where someone on the opposite side is doing the exact opposite, let's take a Caroline Leavitt, for example. I don't think anyone can disagree with this. Her natural tendencies are to raise her voice and be stern and to kind of and project her body language forward. And you have had different discussions back and forth with her. How do you keep your composure in moments that become instantly contentious?
I think with the press and the press secretaries for all politicians, it's a tense relationship. It's not meant to be buddy-buddy or cozy because you're asking pointed questions about decisions they've made, and they probably don't like those questions. I think as reporters, though, I mean, your job is to ask and their job is to answer. And so, you know, I've had relationships and dealt in the briefing room with a string of press secretaries, Biden's press secretaries, Kayleigh McEnany before that, Sean Spicer before that, one press secretary that Trump had that never held a press briefing during her tenure. And so, you know, I think the longer you realize, you know, that all of these press secretaries are doing their job for their boss, you kind of understand how they're operating. But that doesn't change your job, which is to ask questions and get them on the record. And, you know, I think you have to just approach it that in a sober-minded way. And, you know, I always think, what's a question that anyone wants to know the answer to? Not just liberals, not just people on the right. What's a question that, like, you know, my dad, if he has been at work all day and he comes home and he's like, well, why is the government still shut down? Or why is this happening? And why are we striking Iran? And so I just try to think of something that anyone wants to know the answer to, not just one audience. And I think that helps with your credibility.
One thing you said on Jon Stewart's show I thought was pretty cool. He's like, I don't think there's anything the president could say to me that would really surprise me because you're used to his tactics. And again, in this conversation, I'd love to hear different like tactics. And because I think whether someone's interviewing or they're going on a date or they're trying to work a conflict in their marriage, the idea of tactics in conversation is something you're doing every single day.
Yeah.
So when you said that quote on Jon Stewart's show, like what type of tactics is he using when it creates a situation that you're not surprised at all by a response? Is that deflection?
Deflection, or, you know, a pattern that I've noticed lately is we'll go in for an event. I'll try to ask a question at the beginning. He'll cut me off and say, no, not you. And then he'll go to maybe two other reporters. And generally he will come back to me. You know, it's just kind of this song and dance. And the point of, you know, my point of being in there is to get an answer to the question. Or if they don't answer, that's just as telling. And with Trump, I do think he is quite predictable. Like if you've covered him for a while, you kind of have an idea of how he'll respond to something or what's a way to get him to answer that maybe, like, I think short questions with him are the most effective, for example. I think if you have this long wind up, like he's not even listening to your question by the end of it. But like if you ask a short pointed question, you know, generally he'll answer. And so I think that is kind of, you know, a way that I go into it when I'm thinking of what's the best information we're trying to get out of this.
Would you prefer, when you're interviewing someone, would you prefer someone that gives like a long filibuster or someone who's like
short?
Beyond short.
I mean, sometimes politicians are so long-winded that when someone is short.
That was a quick response by you.
Well, now I'm trying to take my own advice because maybe I'm filibustering. I don't want people to be listening to this and be like, well, she filibustered that. But if someone answers, you know, I love when politicians are honest. Okay. And it doesn't always happen very often.
Yeah.
But if we have someone on the show who's really genuine, I really appreciate that. Senator Bernie Sanders is one of those people because I know we can ask him whatever we want and it's not just talking points. And maybe people will completely disagree with him, but he'll genuinely say what he thinks. And so we try to always have people like that on, Republican or Democrat or independent, because I think that's what our audience likes. I think people like people who are authentic and real and aren't talking points and aren't filibustering through an answer.
Makes sense. One last question I got to go back to because I know I'm going to forget if I don't is the earpiece. In reality TV, like the host of a show, like a Chris Harrison, when he's live on, you know, it's after the final rose and he's got the earpiece in, producers are like giving him suggestions of exactly what to say.
Yeah.
You have already addressed, like, people think that they're doing that. I couldn't even respond that fast in real time. What is the earpiece for then? I mean, do you sometimes get that information? Like, what purpose does it serve?
You definitely sometimes do. Mostly it's time cues, though, because I mean, the show is timed so perfectly. My poor team, because I'll go long in interviews. Like if someone says something interesting, I'll just follow up and I'll like completely ignore all the questions we had planned. And then the interview goes like 5 minutes longer, which in cable news is an eternity. And then, you know, we've got to make our commercial breaks and we have to get this. And then we've got a next segment that gets affected by that. So they're like, okay, you got to wrap it up or 30 seconds or, you know, sometimes a little bit like if I can hear the control and be like, oh, like if it was an interesting exchange. But that's really what it's for. It's communication with you in the control room because your team is back there. My team is amazing. And I truly think one of the best in the business. But so it's just communication between the two of you.
Of all the chaotic events that you've covered from 17 to now, which is the most memorable for you in your profession?
I mean, there's so many. I was actually just thinking about this when I was COVID was a huge one because it was such a moment that rocked the world. But really, I was just thinking we were in Alaska when Trump met with Putin this time. And I had been in Helsinki when he met with him the last time. And that was just one, like, you have all these huge moments covering the White House, historic moments. And then you realize, like, later on that that's the thing that stood out in those 4 years. And it's crazy. Like, seeing Putin in person is crazy. Or, like, seeing Kim Jong-un in person. These people that, you know, you talk about and report on all the time and often are, like, dictators or recluses that you don't see that much in public, you know? So I think moments like, I mean, there's so many with Trump, but I think moments like that are at the top.
Yeah. What's something behind the scenes like we wouldn't know? In a moment like that, I have to assume like logistics, security, everything, the schedule you receive, the food you receive, everything's, I'm assuming is different. Is it? When President Trump is meeting with Putin, I have to assume that the logistics of your work day to day is going to be different than if you're doing an interview at the White House or back in New York or DC in your office. What are some of the differences that your average listener, viewer, someone watching just wouldn't be aware of that affects your work?
Well, in Alaska, so we're trying to shoot more behind the scenes stuff this term that we do every Friday night at the end of the show. It's a behind the scenes piece because I do think the behind the scenes is so fascinating to people. We kind of take it for granted because we do it all the time or it doesn't seem that glamorous. And we've actually gotten great feedback on this, but for the Putin summit in Alaska, so it's on a military base. So we're in Anchorage. We get up at probably 5 a.m. and leave the hotel. All the press gets on like a bus, like a school bus. Yeah. You're sitting on this bus for like 2 hours. Secret Service has to sweep you, which means you physically, but also all your stuff, all your gear. And so it takes forever to get in. And then you get in and it's like, you know, the sun's finally coming up and the military base Elmendorf that hosted us was amazing. They like made us all breakfast, but you're all just sitting in a tent and you're all just kind of working, but you're waiting. And then Trump shows up with Putin. They go behind the scenes to meet and you're just waiting. And so we were standing in the room where the press conference was and we thought they were still going to have this lunch. So, you know, the Putin meetings, I've been to Trump's Putin meeting and Biden's where they met in Geneva. And this one, they always go really long. Like the Russians there's a lot of translation. Okay. They always drag them out. And so we were like, it's going to be like 5 p.m. before this thing starts. And all of a sudden we're standing inside the room where all the cameras are and the press conference room. And a White House official kind of gave me this look and said, you should take your seat. And no one is sitting down at this point. And I said, why? They haven't even started lunch yet. And they just go, you should take your seat. So I went and got a really good seat. And like 5 seconds later, everyone rushed in and they'd canceled the lunch. And then Trump and Putin came out and did their announcements. So
are your seats assigned or is it like?
No, it's a free for all. I mean, sometimes they're assigned, but very rarely. So it's kind of like, and you want to make sure you have a good seat so you can get a question. So it's like a lot of waiting around and then a huge burst of action. And then you're processing what happened in real time and then analyzing it on TV. Like you don't have the luxury of like writing a story and having an editor look at it. You analyze it and I just say it on camera and no one has any idea what you're going to say.
That's extremely high pressure, extremely time sensitive. Yeah. And then you're sitting around and you got to be on instantly. Has there ever been a time in your career that like pressure's on, president points to you, some big moment and you just went blank?
No, because I'm prepared.
Wow, that's a trading secret right there. All right, let me ask you about this. This is something I feel like you can't prepare for. We talk money on this podcast. It's reality. It's on every single headline every day. I saw yesterday the Kirks are suing The View for $40 million for defamation. We've seen Trump sue ABC. Yeah. You see Jimmy lose his job. There has to be some instilled fear when these things are happening in a position like yours. This is your job. You don't want to lose it. You're one of the best, if not the best in the country at doing it. How do you navigate those pressures when you wake up to those headlines every day? And you see both sides, right? You see where the right stands with these conversations. You see the left saying First Amendment's being attacked. Like, how do you deal with that? How do you navigate it? And do you feel that pressure?
Well, but I think we are in an unprecedented moment of, and this started when Trump won the election, where, he would sue news outlets that he didn't like. And Trump he has been litigious his whole life. Like him or hate it. We've never seen it be successful until now. And that's not because the merits of the lawsuit are any stronger. A lot of these lawsuits, when you talk to First Amendment lawyers, they think actually the news outlets could have won, but they chose, because Trump has so much power and was wielding it in the way that he was, that instead they decided to settle.
The cost of going and the time and the power associated with it?
I don't know, what always was their mindset. We saw it with a lot of businesses, law firms doing this as well. Sure. And the ones who are fighting it have made it through the courts. It's not over yet. Obviously it takes forever, but Harvard or different schools, we've seen how when they fight it, it plays itself out, and it's pretty hard to sue like a news outlet or an institution like that if there's no merit. I think what's unprecedented is having them settle and pay him off. And then Trump thinks he's won, but it's not that he's won in court. He's just won because obviously he's got immense power as president. He's using it against these institutions.
Does that at all instill fear on your day-to-day, like your job?
It doesn't for me, because I operate, every day we're trying to be honest and fair and on top of our shit. I think that, but my fear is that it does inhibit some people from writing tougher stories or asking tough questions because they're scared of the repercussions. And I don't think that's a good precedent to set for the media. I don't think you should be scared of anyone of asking them questions, Democrat or Republican. You shouldn't fear a reprisal if you're doing your job and you're being honest and fair.
Of all the questions you've had, and let's call it your Grammy, the interviews you've done, the really good pointy questions you've asked, when you look back so far at your career, is like your Grammy moment?
That's a good question.
I'm going to take that as a massive compliment. You told me I asked.
Yeah, exactly.
Mark it.
You should. Or maybe that's a distraction technique for me.
It could be, actually. You're right. You're playing a game of chess. I'm playing checkers over here.
There was this one moment that I didn't really think it stood out, but all my friends always bring it up. It was during COVID. And the reason I bring up that time is because there were only like 10 reporters in the briefing room.
Okay.
So it wasn't packed like you normally see on TV. Like there'd be 10 of us. And it was when Trump came out, the president came out every day, which is so rare, never happens. And he came out and was talking about not even COVID, but about presidential authority. And he said, when you're president, like you have all the authority, you can do whatever you want. Which obviously is not how even like a lot of constitutional attorneys or scholars would look at that. And for some reason, he like just called on me next. And I said, that's not true. Who told you that? And I don't even remember what his answer was, but he didn't answer. But the question was genuinely like, who made you think that presidents have all the authority? That's like the entire reason we have 3 branches of government.
Correct.
And that was an exchange, I think, where it was a question I didn't even have time to think about because he just came out and said that. I wasn't prepared to ask that. But it was just kind of a natural reaction of, where did that come from?
I think my Grammy moment for you was a reel you posted. You were talking to the director of national intelligence. You fact checked. You then Caroline came into you. You then fact checked again. And I think that reel went viral. You know which one I'm talking about?
Yes, it did. Tulsi Gabbard.
And what was that regarding again?
Actually, the director of national intelligence never answered my question because Caroline stepped in to like
back her up.
Right. And so I actually never even got an answer to that.
You didn't get an answer, but you presented the fact. And then she said that, okay, your fact's fact, but this is what I know because I'm with the president every day. That's
a moment where when you're a reporter who goes into the briefing, there's all this stuff that that's happening behind the scenes that always isn't maybe reportable on air because you haven't confirmed it or you hear rumblings about what's happening behind the scenes. And I had heard that the director of national intelligence was not really on the president's good list, that he wasn't super happy with the job she was doing. And basically this move she had taken to declassify these docs was an effort to please him and to make him happy. And so I was thinking in the moment of how can I word this to where it's like what people behind the scenes were saying as well, but also kind of make sure everyone else was brought into that moment in the briefing room.
That's brilliant. That's the definition of a game of chess, right? Like, what's happening behind the scenes, the moving parts, where there's an opportunity to get information that the public could be further interested in. And you created an amazing moment, I think, for you and for everyone to watch, which is awesome. Let's talk about the opposite. Buffalo Bills, they lost 4 Super Bowls. What's like your missed opportunity? What's like the one interview, the one time you walked away, you're like, how the hell did I forget to not ask this in this moment?
There's a million of those. I don't even know if there's one I could point to, but I always have question regret. Like not of what I asked. Normally it's like what I didn't ask, or if I think of it's, anytime you're in a conversation with someone and you have a really good comeback that you thought of like the next day when you're on the treadmill, that's basically your life every day as a reporter, especially when you're interviewing people. And we always laugh. I have this guy, Patrick, on my team who's amazing. We're always brainstorming questions. And we're always like, at 3 a.m. I thought of this. And anytime I say that, he's like, well, I was thinking of this morning when I was dropping my kid off. Like we always are that's how your brain works as a reporter. You're always thinking, I could have asked that better, more direct. I could have stopped talking. I think one key thing to interview someone, and you obviously know this because you do it all the time, is to stop talking as the questioner. Like just let them talk.
Yeah. Do you have any other hard and fast rules, like not asking binary questions for a yes or no answer, or never start a question with a certain word, any type of...
You know what drives me nuts is, and I think is a crutch, because I think people, you listen to things and so you think, okay, I'm going to do that too. They say, if you're asking a question, if you're a lawmaker and I'm like grilling you and you just won't answer, sometimes I see people say, well, let me ask it a different way. And then they ask it, but then that person knows you're still asking the same question.
I think that's terrible.
So don't say it, just do it.
Just do it. Yeah, because the second you say that, I now have time to rethink about what I'm going to say.
Exactly.
Also, my defense mechanism is going to go up more. Like, I don't like the way that's positioned. I don't feel so. I'm going to go even higher defense mode.
Yeah, like when you were asking me how much money I make, I'm not going to say it.
Yeah.
If you had said, well, let me ask you a different way, like I still know you're asking the same question.
And now you have time and you're going to be even more defensive.
Yeah, you told me what you're doing.
Yeah, that's like,
gave away
that's
your
even more of negotiation, which I guess negotiation does tie into like arts of negotiation conversation, does tie in a lot to what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's life for anybody.
Yeah. All right. I want to get this behind the scenes, some trading secrets of the White House. You had Trump administration, Biden administration, now the Trump administration. We see stuff like, we always see the pictures of like the gold and, what are things we don't know? Like, what are some of just the differences that impact your day-to-day work? Like, is the food different? Is the staffing different? Is the security different? Just like
the food is just a vending machine.
That's what you eat.
I mean,
there?
also,
why do I feel like you're getting served a gold,
I need people to come see the White House because I think it's not. The White House is amazing.
Yeah, of course.
There's not a day that I walk in where I'm not like, I love covering this place and it's amazing. But when you go in where the press is, so you see what you see on TV, the press briefing room, the number one comment I always hear from people when they come in is, it's so much smaller in person than what it looks like on TV. Our offices are underneath that. Like some of them are above ground, but like CNN, Fox News, and then a bunch of other outlets are downstairs. And we have these tiny little things that we call the booth. And you're like working shoulder to shoulder with your colleagues. It's a very cramped space. Everyone always has to be in a good mood because if there's one person in a bad mood, the whole booth, the whole downstairs can feel it. We're right next to Fox News. We share a wall with them. We can hear everything they're saying. They can hear everything we're saying. And it's kind of a moment where it's just not very glamorous. We have this, you go upstairs and there's a vending machine. That's it. You have to like leave campus to get food or bring your own. And if you don't, and then Trump goes to like a 3-hour press conference, like good luck.
How long will security take to get in start to finish?
Like 5 minutes. It's Secret
quick.
Service.
Okay.
I mean, if you have like a certain badge called a hard pass, if you go in regularly, and it's the same guys working the booth, you know them. And we call the kitchen where we like meet and have like our stuff. We call it the lavatoria because the bathrooms are in the kitchen, like right there. So it's like when it's a crowded day, you're all on top of each other and it's like crazy.
Is something big happening right now?
No.
Are we still in shutdown? Has the shutdown changed?
The shutdown hasn't ended, just for the record. I mean, it could by the end of this podcast.
When the shutdown does, we're in a shutdown right now, does that change your work hours?
Yeah, because we worked until, normally my show's 9 to 10.
Okay.
So I'm at the White House all day, leave around 7, go get ready for the show, do the show. We stayed up till 1 a.m. the other night though, because funding lapsed at midnight. So we wanted to be up at midnight when the government actually shut down.
You don't sleep much.
Not really.
And nor does President
you?
Trump. No, I know. I slept 4 hours last night.
And you feel fine? Okay, that's crazy.
I'm on this is my 4th cup of coffee.
4 hours is nuts. 4 hours is Trump level.
4 hours. Yeah. And the night before was like 6. Before that was like 7. So it varies. But is that what he sleeps? Like 4 hours?
He like does not sleep.
Yeah, I did Fox and Friends finance segment, and it was just on Gen Zs and finance. And one of the executive producers like, we just want to show you around. And they showed me the control room. And I said, how have things been in the control room as of late? She's like, none of us are sleeping because the president doesn't sleep. We're all working 2 times right now. Do you feel that same way?
I was just talking to someone about this because we wrote this story on what traveling with him is like in the first term, because I had this source who said, you never want to be on Air Force One on a trip. And I said, why? Like, you'd think you want to be in the axis of power close to Trump. He doesn't sleep on these trips. And like, you're going to Asia or something, and that's kind of the only time you're going to sleep before you go on this trip.
Yeah.
But Trump is just always up and talking, and he'll like have them go wake staff up if they're asleep because he wants to talk to them. And so we have this big trip to Asia coming up, and you're not going to sleep on that flight.
One thing I got to ask, and I hate that I compare it back to reality TV, but in reality TV, it's all I know. People will be on camera.
I love reality TV.
All right, good. All right, good. I love that. What's your show? What do you watch?
I mean, I'm a big Bravo person.
Okay, so which of the Bravo shows?
All of them.
What's your favorite?
I love The Real Housewives.
Okay.
Many of the franchises.
All right.
I was a Pump Rules person. Love Southern Charm.
Okay.
Those are pretty much them. I laugh because our CNN photojournalists, they might kill me for saying this.
Yeah.
There's these amazing guys, great reporters. They love Below Deck.
Oh, interesting.
Huge Below Deck people.
Yeah, those people could party.
Yeah.
We've been out with them.
They love watching Below Deck.
That's kind of my question, though, is like we see everything that happens on camera. Real Housewives, they have this like serious contention. Cameras are off, and they kind of sometimes wink at each other, play the game. Like, all right, we're doing that. That is what it is. It's different on camera versus off camera. Like
that is Trump.
Okay, is that Trump? I was gonna say, is that Trump? Is that Caroline? Like, how about Caroline Levitt? Is that the same way?
With Karoline Leavitt, obviously, I think, being a Trump spokesperson is a very singular job, and you can watch the briefings for yourself. I will say, and I told this story recently, when we were in Saudi Arabia on a trip recently, a couple of months ago, there was this moment where I was in the pool and all the world leaders came in, including the Saudi crown prince. And we're like covering this event. And the Saudi crown prince comes in, and he obviously does not like the press, if you know history at all. And they don't get questions shouted at them like we do in the United States. And Trump walked in and he kind of waved at me. And so I shouted a question to him about how the meeting had gone, because it was this high stakes meeting. And right after that, the Saudi royal guard was like, you cannot come into the next event. And they were, all like, they were deeply upset that I had asked a question, and they were all kind of talking. And I said, no, like, I told the White House press, I was like, you can't like block someone from coming in. Like, that's like kind of our number one thing.
Yeah.
And to Karoline Leavitt's credit, she was like, no, Kaitlan's coming in with the rest of the U.S. press. And so I went into the next event.
Wow.
But I think things like that, you can disagree about questions and briefings and whatnot. Press access is like key, and every administration, I think, should protect that.
I love it. All right. Well, what's next? Like, where do you go? Do you have an interest at all in getting into politics? Like, you've seen so many angles.
My dad really wants me to run for office.
Would you?
No, he just wants to get like better seats to the Bama football games. Like, truly, he does.
But would you run for office?
No, I like to cover politicians.
Like, never in your, like, you don't think in a wild world you might?
I mean, I would never say no, because I also never thought I'd be a cable news anchor covering Donald Trump at the White House.
So where do you see your career going?
I'm plenty busy right now. I don't know. I got it. I'm like,
yeah, but you have. I've heard you talk on an interview about like you have a notepad of people that you want to interview, correct?
Yeah.
So do you have a notepad anywhere of like career dreams, aspirations, financial dreams?
No, I think that obviously I love being in the game. I always want to be successful. I'm really ambitious. But I also think that you can't plan too far ahead. Like, I never planned this. And I think that if I had got out of college, or if I had, been 24 and said, this is what I'm going to do, I might not have ended up where I am. And I might have said no to certain opportunities. And that's why I just think it's good to have goals and things that you want to do and like work to achieve them. But I think you also have to be open for what comes your way, because did I ever think Trump would be president and I would cover the White House? No. Did I ever think Trump would be president again and I'd be covering the White House again? Also no. But here I am.
In a million years in high school or even college or even just as a kid, did you ever think you would be a chief White House correspondent? Was that ever in your trajectory?
No, I tried to be a chemist in college, and I was so bad at chemistry.
Okay.
And I nearly failed Chem 102. my sophomore year or my second semester of freshman year. And I went home and I truly was like, I need a new major or I'm going to fail out of college. And I didn't like I wasn't enjoying school. I was having fun at Alabama, but I wasn't like really committed and engaged. And I switched to journalism and political science. And it totally changed everything for me. I loved going to class. I never missed class. I became this great student, but I cared about what I was doing. So I think you have to like care and have some passion for what you're doing.
It's brilliant. I mean, there's so many good trading secrets just in this interview. Just a couple of questions, then we'll wrap up. Last one I got for you is you're in it, you see it, you're researching it every single day. If you had to predict what like State of the Union of U.S. politics looks like in like a year or two, like given the information you have, like what do you
Let's just hope we're still here.
Yeah. I hate that oh Lord was your response.
I truly
So do you think this is the most chaotic time since you've been in this position?
No, I don't actually. And I've been doing a lot of reading on that. And there's this book I read recently called The Age of Acrimony.
Okay.
It's not for everyone, but it's about the United States from like the 1860s until 1910. And it was crazy. And there were political assassinations all the time. When people would go out on the campaign trail, they were like getting physically assaulted. It was a moment in America where you read this and you think, whoa, how did we come back from the brink? And we did. And so obviously I think, we are at a moment though, where I think anyone you talk to about politics, it's just like such a divisive conversation. People feel hopeless about it. And I hope that's not always the case.
The future, what does it look like?
I don't know.
You're so good at deflecting, and I forgot where I was. I'm like, I gotta go back 5 statements. No, it was a really. I'm serious when I say it.
I don't know. I can't predict.
It was a great answer, and every answer you've given, honestly, has been just full of information and just insight. I think as people navigate their careers and things that they want to do and tactics they use in conversations, and just the idea of like, you can't look that far ahead, because if you look that far ahead, you might have had a blueprint for something else that never would have put you here. And so I think that all makes so much sense. I could talk to you for another hour or two, but I know your phones are busy, you're buzzing, the government shut down, and you got to get back to work. So let's wrap with your trading secret. So you've given us a lot of it, but it's specific to you. You can't get in a TikTok tutorial, which, by the way, before I get into that, why don't you're not active on TikTok?
Okay, I'm so glad you brought this up.
Is that a CNN thing or no?
No, I actually just signed up for TikTok the other day because
you have 21 posts.
It's so funny because someone from TikTok texted me while we're doing this podcast because I'm trying to get my account because there's an imposter account for me that I think Danielle's seen. It has 90,000 followers. Like there's all these imposters.
That's the one I saw too.
It's not me.
And it's verified, and there's 21 posts.
Yeah, it's not me.
So you're not on TikTok.
They just ripped my content.
Why aren't you on TikTok?
I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram.
You're on Twitter and Instagram.
But I'm now delving into the TikTok world. But I just said it wasn't like for me, I thought.
Okay, I got one more question that I know you got to go. This is what I'm really interested in. Because it has to do with social media monetization. We're seeing a lot of like reporters, journalists that were the head of all the shows within their networks, like a Tucker Carlson, and they're now going independent. Yeah. And they talk very openly about how much like money they're making independently versus with the network. I just wanted to get your take. Do you think, I'm not asking you specifically if it's something you're thinking about, but do you think it's a possibility that that's what ends up happening? Like everyone has their own network?
I don't know. I think it's obviously been really successful for some people, and it's a venture that like is a new space that people are exploring. And I think it's been really lucrative for a lot of them.
Yeah.
The other part of it, though, that I think people have to keep in mind is the reason when Russia invades Ukraine that you're watching it live on CNN is because we've been stationed there for months. Like we've poured all these resources into this. And so I think there's a huge value in independent media. I also think there's a value, though, in having like an organization that is like a huge machine like CNN that can like be ready for something like that. Like with Israel and Gaza, we have reporters on the ground, you know, as it's happening and like covering it to where you're watching it in a way you can't with other things. Yeah, so I see the benefits in both. And I think that there's a lot to listen to, a lot to watch. And I think both are beneficial to people.
It's a good point. It's a good point. All right, we'll get your trading secret this time. So something you can't learn in a textbook or learn from a professor or a TikTok tutorial, which you're not on. Those are fake accounts, but you will be.
But TBD.
But TBD. It's coming soon. What's something you could leave us with, Kaitlan?
No matter what industry you're in, it's also you feeling confident in the moment and you feeling like you've got this. Because even if sometimes you can be prepared, but if you don't have that, you're not going to be the best you can be. Being a reporter, you have to be confident because you're getting chastised sometimes, or like people are trying to like make you cower or be scared of asking your question. And you kind of can be in there maybe by yourself and you're in that moment, or if you're in a one-on-one interview, you really have to come at it with that. And the reason I'm so prepared, and I always try to be prepared, is because that gives you the confidence, I think, to ask whatever you want. Like, I don't need to always have notes, or if I'm sitting in a briefing, the reason you can respond quickly is because you're well-read and well-versed on the issue. And I always think people can know when you know what you're talking about. And if you don't, they can sense it. And so I just think no matter what job you're in or what you're doing, being prepared and hard work, honestly. When I started CNN, I was asked to stay late at the White House. I missed a million dinners, birthday parties, whatever. But I always said yes because I loved the work and I really enjoyed it. And I think if you're willing to do things that other people aren't, you will succeed in places where other people don't.
How many hours a day do you think you're preparing for whatever's next?
I'm constantly preparing.
Just doesn't stop.
Like it really, every now and then maybe, but like even on the weekends, I'm reading the paper front to back. I watch the Sunday shows. I'm on Twitter because you never know when something's going to happen. It doesn't happen. News doesn't break 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Like it's always like the least convenient moment. As like, when I'm in an Uber going to visit my friend's baby and Biden drops out and we whip around and go to CNN. So it's just being prepared.
That is awesome.
Because you don't want the moment to come and to miss it,
You can't miss it. And you got to be prepared. It's amazing to see what you've done in such a short period of time. Congratulations on all the success. Thank you for trading all the secrets, even the questions you wouldn't ask. You still gave me enough.
Deflections.
You still gave me enough in those deflections. Where can everyone find everything you have going on?
TikTok.
Not
to come. Instagram, Twitter is where I live, though.
I love it. All right. Good stuff. Well,
thank you for having me.
Thank you so much
this was so fun.
This was great. You killed it.
Yeah.
Thank you.